Doing, Ron?
What's up, Jeff? How are you, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's another fantastic day in the news. I can't wait to cover it all.
Here, I'm letting the internet know that I'm here.
Yep,
I'm on GYT Nation now.
gotta let the internets know, or else they won't be able to find us. Some
They
weird
won't
stuff
know.
happening with the algorithm. Sort of like behind the scenes kind of thing. But a lot of you in the audience have said, "Hey, man, well, I don't get notifications from your videos or when you guys are going live anymore, so I don't know when you're on." So that's a big problem. And all I can do is to say that we normally have the show 3 p.m. Eastern every day, and we've got 5, 6 videos going up on a daily basis. So the best thing I can say is just to be here at those times, and we'll be around. We'll be around.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I mean, I get the same, not just
Mm-hmm.
over on the Jimmy Dore show. We get emails every day. And then on my personal channel, same thing. People saying,
Right.
I don't get notifications. I don't know when you're live. Yeah, I mean, it's happening. It
We,
is happening.
and so, for all of us, we all keep a pretty straight schedule. So, you know, we'll let you know when you can find us. And it's usually about the same time. I can't speak for Jimmy, but I just found out what you guys have, like a Saturday live stream or something.
Yeah, we typically live stream Saturdays at 2.
Had no idea.
But the rest of the week is just clips, at least for right now. And then for me, like on my own thing, I stream every day, or no, not every day. Tuesday through Friday at 10 a.m. is when I stream.
Yeah, it's when
On my own channel.
you get your news on.
I get my news on, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Get your news on with Ron.
Exactly. All right. So let's get into that first story here. Let's talk about parades. We're going to rain on Trump's parade. So President Trump wants a military parade. The New York Times is reporting that the military is actually working on giving Trump a grand, wonderful, beautiful, tremendous parade. In fact, according to, I should say, citing a military official who spoke on the condition of anonymity, he said the marching orders were, "I want a parade like the one in France." It has to be like the one in France, Ron. It can't be like any other kind of parade. It has to be like a French one.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a French parade, but with a little bit more freedom.
Yeah, right.
Now, in fact, the Times says the inspiration for Trump's push is last year's Bastille Day celebration in Paris. Of course, that's when President Trump was actually there as a guest of President Emmanuel Macron, the centrist neoliberal. We don't really have to get too much into him. Trump was awestruck by the tableau of uniformed French troops marching down Avenue de Champs, whatever, with tanks, armored vehicles, gun trucks, carriers, complete with fighter jets flying over the Arc de Triomphe and painting the sky with streaks of blue, white, red, and red smoke for the colors of the French flag. This apparently gave Trump a gigantic war boner. Because nothing spells patriotism like showing off all the stuff that you can murder people with.
Okay, so do we want to tell people what really happened? Like why he's really doing this?
We'll get to it. We'll get to
Okay.
it. I just want to add that nothing gets morons more excited than watching weapons of war go by. Just
Mm-hmm.
saying.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, I
saying.
mean Brian Williams
Yeah.
comes in his pants whenever he sees a missile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that Trump was watching that entire parade with one hand on his junk. Just saying. Just saying.
And it's huge, believe me.
Huge. Well, I mean, if you have tiny hands, of course it's going to be bigger. It's going to feel bigger.
True.
Now, aboard Air Force One, he said Trump had told aides that he was dazzled by the French display and he wanted one home. And it was on his mind even 2 months later when he met with Macron. He said it was one of the greatest parades I'd ever seen. Big, beautiful parade. Big, beautiful weapons. It was 2 hours on the button. Military might. And I think a tremendous thing for France and for the spirit of France. We're going to have to try to top it. All right, so Run.
Probably the only time he actually had an ideological stance on anything, a parade.
No, I know. Because it's got to be better than France.
Right. Well, here's the thing. I think it's nice that they dressed this up like, oh, he saw something in France and it gave him a war boner. But here's what's also really going on. When are the only times that President Trump has been praised as a whole by the media and by the establishment?
Anytime he bombs somebody.
Exactly. Anytime he has an act of war or a war-esque rhetorical event. You know, when was he declared? At that moment, he became presidential. Well, when he dropped bombs on Syria. That was when they said that. That was the moment that he became presidential. Also, let's keep in mind, what was the one event where he got an applause break every 5 minutes because he successfully read a sentence? That was the war rally disguised as a State of the Union address. Boom. Trump has one trick. It's PR. So he knows that war is the one thing he can get right. We love endless war. That's what we're all about.
Yep.
So he wants to have a big parade to help his numbers. And that's all this is. Trump knows how to play the establishment like a fiddle. PR is the one trick he has. That's the one thing he's good at. And now that you've shown him, I mean, it's kind of like just giving positive reinforcement to a little kid.
Right.
You know, I mean,
basically.
Now that you've shown him, this is when you get rewarded when you're a warmonger. He's going to be a warmonger. He probably doesn't even remember that the whole non-interventionist lie helped get him elected. It doesn't matter at this point. He gets a pat on the back when he's a warmonger, so he's going to do it. And that means having a parade. That's another moment he can be in the spotlight. He might even get an opportunity to pass some paper towels to people. Who knows?
Yeah, you're right. If there's one thing Americans love, it's endless war. It's militarism. And so, I mean, even look at the Democrats, right? The Democrats just voted. They just got into an agreement with, at least in the Senate, with Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell got together and they decided to give over $100 billion, I think somewhere $130 billion to the Pentagon as part of a deal to keep the government open. Mm-hmm. Here, let's just hand over more money to the Pentagon. We already, spend $700 billion already on the Pentagon. And by the way, this is the same Pentagon that lost $800 million. Just randomly. Gone. Poof.
I saw an article in The Hill today about that very budget, and the way that it described the budget, it literally had defense spending and non-defense spending. And that just shows how insane our defense budget is. We literally can just categorize defense as just one thing, and everything else is so marginal in comparison. It's just non-defense. So it's like, well, you're either defense or you're non-defense. You're in that et cetera category if you're not defense spending. That's how out of hand we are as a nation when it comes to defense spending. And what does the bill not include? You guessed it, DACA. The Dems caved on DACA. At this point, Nancy Pelosi is just asking for a commitment from Paul Ryan to promise that he'll consider it at some point. That's your resistance. That's your resistance. Hey, promise you'll talk about this at some point.
They're resisting so hard. It must be so difficult to resist so much. I mean, man, how do they do it? Especially with those soft little jellyfish spines.
They do it with donor money in their pocket. That's how they do it.
Donor money. For a second, I thought you were going to say donut Twitter. I don't know why.
Well,
it's the same people.
Their thing too.
It is the same people.
That is also their thing.
Yeah. So, and look, that $800 million that's lost, it didn't get lost. It went into somebody's pocket. Just like the rest of this money, it's going right to the defense contractors that use that money, take billions and billions of dollars, and what do? They spend it on bombs that right now we're using to bomb Yemen with. We're giving the Saudi Arabians, the Wahhabiist, like you want to say we're worried about Islamic terrorism, right? Saudi Arabia is an exporter of terror. And, no, they're our friends because they have oil.
Yep.
It's the petrodollar. So, no, we're going to ignore Saudi Arabia and the fact that they have spread the Wahhabist Islam all over the Middle East. And those same people radicalized by the Saudis are the same people that we're supposedly at war with or was at war with ISIS. I don't know. It's insane. But Again, we're
Well,
going
it's
to drop more
absolutely
money
insane.
into
And
this.
even the people are like, oh, well, what about, maintaining some kind of world cooperation and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, couldn't we have a positive role in that and not
Bomb
exploit
people?
endless war in the Middle East? Like, why do we have to have, why do we have to pick one or the other or have both or none? Can't we just have, like the good stuff as far as world diplomacy and not exploit in the Middle East? Why do we have to, well, the US does this, this, and this? Yeah, but we also pursue endless war over resources. Why do we have to do that part of it? We don't. Like, that doesn't have to be part of it.
Yeah. And yet they'll never understand that because it's linked to their paychecks. The defense industry, so-called defense industry, I should put an asterisk or, air quotes by it every time I say it. Because it's not a defense, it's offense. It's the war budget. It's the war office, the war industry. And that's our main export. War, death, weapons. That's it. It ain't, sure as hell ain't freedom.
Or democracy.
Exactly. And by the way, what happened to the anti-war left? Where'd it go? I mean, you're pretty much looking at it right here.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just some independent media is pretty much what's left of it, and a lot of activists, activists.
Absolutely.
So it's not just, but
they're not in the.
That's pretty much it.
They're not in the Democratic Party.
No,
not as a whole.
They are not. No.
They're not in the Democratic leadership.
Absolutely not.
They're definitely not in the media, who hasn't found a war that they have not beat the drums for in forever. Mm-hmm. So you're basically looking at the anti-war left and seeing these displays of military might, even if it is just to placate a child who's like, ooh, shiny toys.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, that makes me think of the movie Toys, right? And Robin Williams, what he said about war, his character, war is the domain of the tiny penis. Just saying.
Mm-hmm.
From his lips to God's ears, basically, if you believe in that. And that definitely sums up President Trump.
Yeah, I think we got it. I think we got it all.
Nailed it. All right, Ron. Thanks a lot for joining me for this discussion. Can't wait to see you back next week. Wish we could do longer segments, but
yeah. It's a busy time right now, but that would be great. Yeah. And could I plug my
Absolutely.
Stuff real quick?
Go ahead.
Is that all right? So I do a new stream called Get Your News On with Ron. It's where people tweet me articles, and that's how we build the show. Basically, the audience is my executive producer. We've been having a lot of fun with it. I do it every Tuesday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, live on my YouTube channel, which is just youtube.com/Ron Placone. And then I'm on another streaming app called Live Me as well. But, feel free to tune in on the YouTube. Send me some articles. Send me some questions. It's a really fun, interactive show. We've been having a good time with it. And, of course, most of you guys already know this, but, of course, you can catch me over on the Jimmy Dore Show.
All right. Awesome, Ron. Thanks a lot for coming.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Thanks
we'll see you later.
Buddy.
You have
see
a good
next
one.
Week.
All right. To go along with that, just for a second, I've also been asking for submissions for stories. So if you're not following me on Twitter, you can follow me at Jeff's Politics, and every day I will ask you for your feedback on, hey, what would you like me to cover on today's show? And I usually gather a collection of different stories that you ask me to cover. So, all right. Now let's not take a break. Let's jump in. We got plenty of stuff to talk about. We got a couple of Trump stories. I know I haven't been doing very many of them lately, but today will be a little bit of an exception because we've got some fun stuff. All right. And by the way, if you haven't already, please give us a like and a share on YouTube and on Facebook, where we stream live, of course, every day, 5 days a week, from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. All right. Now, the creators of the show that catapulted the character of Donald Trump into reality show stardom have a bit of a message. It was all a scam. In the recently released Netflix documentary, The Confidence Man, two creators of The Apprentice discussed creating what they called the character of Donald Trump as a billionaire business tycoon. Basically, what they're saying is that, that's not who Trump was, that's what we created. Interesting. He said, this is producer Bill Pruitt saying, quote, "What we did, that was a scam, that was an entertainment." So understand the billionaire do-it-yourself persona of Donald Trump, the winning at every cost, that is basically nothing more than fiction. It is fake. It's not an actual real person, even though that's exactly what the president actually acts like. Now, The Confidence Man, directed by Fisher Stevens, is the final episode in the Alex Gibney created docuseries called Dirty Money, which is something that I'm probably going to have to check out. Now, it says that Trump the Tycoon is basically just a myth created by the infamous self-promoter. So, again, it's a lie. It's not actually true. Now, that shouldn't be surprising to anybody who studied Donald Trump. This guy's a buffoon who's never worked a day in his life. But see, these TV guys, what they did is that they were able to take an image, or they were able to create an image of success. And apparently creating that image wasn't easy. They actually had to put a lot of work into it. In fact, Pruitt describes Trump's real office within New York's Trump Tower as dated. He said, if you walked around Trump's actual office in Trump Tower, you'd see the woods chipped. And what's that smell? Pruitt said in the film, it wasn't the empire we were going to have to sell to people. We needed to gussy it up a bit. And we did. So they basically built him an entire new set where he could do The Apprentice from. Wasn't his real office, obviously. It was a gigantic fake, a facade. And his real office apparently smells like I don't know what. But apparently the smell was not good. Now, not only that, but they say that Trump desperately wanted to be referred to as a billionaire. The New York gossip columnist A.J. Benza recalled that Trump gave him dirt on the Manhattan nightlife scene in exchange for making sure to label him as a billionaire. Benza says, quote, he wanted to be paid back in a particular way, regardless of what you mentioned. He never really cared as long as you said the word billionaire. So you could say billionaire jackass and he'd be fine with it because, at least I'm a billionaire. That's crazy. Now, I get a couple of things from that. Number one, that means he is nowhere near being a billionaire. Nobody is so desperate to be labeled a billionaire unless they are in fact not a billionaire. And very, very insecure about that fact. It kind of makes you think about the reason that we've never seen his tax returns before. And why he wants Robert Mueller out of his bank account, among other things, right? Now, of course, I'm thinking that maybe he did some possible money laundering, but it also could be that there is no money laundering, there's no Russian connection, and he's just deeply insecure about people finding out that he's not actually a billionaire. It is possible. It is entirely possible. And also would explain why he really, really wants to fire Mueller. Now, why do I think he's not a billionaire, like he says? Again, a billionaire doesn't stiff money out of people that he owes. He even stiffed the Freedom Girls, right? And it was only, what, a couple $1,000s for him? Billionaire, that's peanuts. Not only that, but a billionaire would actually give more money towards his campaign, his presidential campaign. He only gave a couple million to his campaign. A billionaire doesn't create a phony college or try to run as many scams as Donald Trump currently runs. For example, Mar-a-Lago, right, his winter White House. He jacked up the prices for admission once he won to $200,000 for membership, just to go and talk to him. That is a scam. Look, he's a bad businessman and a scam artist. But that's not what the makers of The Apprentice wanted. That's not the image they wanted. So they had to clean it up. And again, it was not easy. In fact, the reality of Trump's situation, the film says, is that by the early 1990s, the Trump organization was facing over $3 billion of debt, and its 3 Atlantic City casinos went bankrupt. In the following years leading to The Apprentice, Trump was a man in trouble. Lots and lots of financial trouble. Again, if you're a billionaire, if you're a successful businessman, you wouldn't be in financial trouble. Now, Timothy O'Brien, a Trump biographer, says in the film that his 2005 book, Trump Nation, The Art of Being the Donald, claimed that Trump was worth between a total of $150 million to $250 million. That is far from being a billionaire. Now, when this book came out, of course, Trump decided to sue him for libel. Guess what happened? He lost. Sad. And now we also know, and I've talked about this in other segments, that there are a lot of banks out there that were not willing to loan money to Donald Trump due to multiple bank defaults and bankruptcies. There was one group of people that was more than willing to loan him money, and that was Russian banks. Just saying. So, how did they fix that image? The Confidence Man tells us how Trump made licensing deals that put his name on a wide assortment of properties, giving the impression that he was king of a vast empire. And of course, all that stuff worked beyond their expectations. Stevens told People magazine that, quote, Trump's brilliance to me is that he has incredible charisma. He is a TV star and knows how to build his brand. But when it comes to building buildings, he doesn't know how to do any of that. O'Brien said, quote, The Apprentice overnight repositioned him in the American imagination as the embodiment of deal-making savvy, capable entrepreneur, and business success. But again, that was not the reality. At the time, contends the film, few knew just how much Trump desperately needed the show. In The Confidence Man, Apprentice supervising editor Jonathan Braun asked Pruitt if Trump treated the first season as a joke. Pruitt said, quote, no, it was one of his many things that day to save his empire. Without The Apprentice, he would never be president, and using reality television as a platform improved his image. But that was not who he really is. He is a character like on a TV show. We didn't think that so many people would look at it and go, that's real. This guy's amazing. Unfortunately, these people vastly overestimated at least a quarter of the American voting bloc. And to be fair, he was against another one of the most unpopular politicians in America, Hillary Clinton. She inspired basically no one. So this was a freak election where you had, again, the worst Democratic candidate that you could come up with versus Trump, who, I guess to his credit, does have a lot of charisma and knows how to speak to people, albeit at a 3rd to 4th grade level. So, yes, people looked at him and they said, oh, that's amazing. They bought the lie, hook, line, and sinker. They bought this image, which wasn't at all true. So now why speak out now? I mean, again, it would have been nice had they spoke out during the election. Well, Stevens tells People, we wanted to show that Donald Trump is not a good businessman when it comes to building a company and managing a company. And I wanted to say how scary it is that he is running the country because he doesn't do due diligence on any of his deals. Now, look, I think the majority of the country already understands that. However, to be fair, his poll numbers recently have been going up, and that's not a good sign. I think it shows me that no matter what, to some people, fiction trumps reality. Pun totally intended. Okay. More. I told you this is going to be a Trump day. Okay. Yep, that's the one. So now President Trump likes to brag about the gains that happened under the stock market while he is president. Now, that was over the last year. Of course, the stock market has continued to grow and actually do pretty good. Now, most of us know, however, I would hope so, that the stock market is not representative of the economy at large. And other than some 401ks that do belong to people who are middle class, who have retirements through work, most Americans don't have, well, any stock in what happens in the stock market on Wall Street. Now, we should also know that Donald Trump has had actually very little to do with the stock market, whether it's going up or down. For one, he hasn't put any policy into place, at least not over the past year. Basically, in 2017, all of 2017, we were still running on the Obama economy. So President Obama's policies were still in place the entire year. Can't exactly take credit for that, right? And of course, under President Obama, I pointed out before that the rich and corporations have actually done incredibly well, while regular Americans have not. So it's a criticism I give to both President Obama and President Trump. Under both of those administrations, the wealthy have gotten even wealthier, and the poor have gotten poorer, and things have not improved for regular middle class, working class people. So, anyway, over the weekend and earlier into this week, the stock market, which has been inflated because of the rich having so much money, and now even more so with the Trump tax cuts, which causes, of course, these companies that have a surplus of extra money now to do stock buybacks. Okay, so they do stock buybacks, they inflate the market, and the market goes up for a while, and every once in a while, it has a correction. Now, that's exactly what happened the past few days. There has been a correction, and that has caused stocks to tumble before, of course, recovering some of the losses. Now, interestingly enough, when it comes to the stocks actually falling, you don't hear Trump talking about that. No. But again, the truth is that no matter who takes credit for it, you can't actually give the president credit for what happens in the stock market because he's got little to do with both the rise and the fall of stocks. He's sort of independent of it, okay? Now, there are experts out there that are saying exactly that. This is Dan Alpert, managing partner at Westwood Capital, telling Bess Levin, writing for Vanity Fair. He said, quote, Trump's claims all along that the stock market is reflecting his presidency are as ridiculous as blaming him when the market goes down. At the end of the day, the markets would not have risen if not for fairly good corporate earnings and improvement in employment stats and everything that goes along with that. And it's true. Again, the economy has been fairly steady. Corporate profits have obviously been very, very good. Wages basically stagnant, very, very little growth in that. And of course, there are a lot of workers that are like, hey, man, corporations are doing awesome. Maybe we should get a share of that. And that also went into part of why there is a bit of a correction, because workers are starting to demand higher wages, which I believe that every worker should have a living wage. And maybe, we could look into having like a maximum wage for corporate executives, but it's a completely different conversation. Now, let's see. Again, employment stats, corporate earnings, doing pretty good. So you had stocks doing pretty good. But Dan Alpert says, quote, Trump doesn't truly understand any of this. He does not understand what's going on in the financial markets. Well, that's because Trump is an idiot. And that's actually sort of a nice way of putting it. Now, Greg Valere, chief strategist for Horizon Investments, added that though the ex-real estate mogul may, quote, fancy himself a great expert on all things financial, the markets are tricky and they're really humbling. Not to be cliche, but you live by the sword and you die by the sword. You can't have it both ways. So that right there, he's basically saying Donald Trump, he can't have it both ways. He can't claim that the stock market was fantastic under his watch and that the stock market tumble was not his fault. Now, ironically, that's, of course, what they're actually trying to do. You have Republican Sean Hannity, they're like, stock market going down, Obama. That doesn't even make any sense. Like, how are you going to go and blame Obama for the stock market going down a little bit when it traditionally has been going up? He hasn't had anything to do with it. He's been out of presidency for over a year now. But, of course, they're going to do that. Now, basically, if you take credit for rising markets under your watch, then you need to take credit for falling markets under your watch, too. It's only fair. But again, as I mentioned, the president has actually little to do with what's going on in the stock market other than helping to create the environment. And that, again, that same environment existed under Barack Obama, where the stock market continued to rise. And those policies continued into the first year of the Trump presidency. But anyway, no. But the president thinks, no, markets love me. I'm the greatest stock market president ever, without actually knowing anything. He is a child. He's a baby. He doesn't quite understand. And he hasn't said baby for a while yet, for a while. But see, again, that's what he's going to do. Now, Levin writes, another president may have been humbled by Monday's proceedings, which not only made Trump look dumb, but cut into his press time. But Trump is no ordinary commander-in-chief. During a hearing on Tuesday, he ordered Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin to tell the House Financial Services Committee that the administration will, quote, still claim credit for the fact that the market is up over 30% since the election. But again, Donald Trump didn't do anything to do that. The only legislative achievement that he really has, and I use the word achievement pretty loosely, is cutting taxes for corporations. Now, again, I explained earlier that when you do that, and these companies are now flush with cash, what are they going to do? They're not going to invest in more jobs without demand. No, what they're going to do is that they're going to do more stock buybacks, which, of course, inflates the stock market. That's why the stock market is a terrible indicator for the health of the economy overall. Just because the financiers are doing great doesn't mean everybody else is. In fact, most Americans are not benefiting from these tax cuts. In fact, there was a recent poll, and I love to cite this one. Only 2% of Americans polled say that they have seen any sort of benefit from the tax cut, and that includes raises in pay and bonuses. 2% of Americans. However, at the same time, a lot of places, Carrier, Comcast, AT&T, Harley-Davidson, Kimberly-Clark, all companies that are saving billions of dollars from these tax cuts also have simultaneously cut jobs. That's despite giving out bonuses to a few lucky people that amount to what is basically pocket change compared to what their true profit margins actually are. So, but anyway, despite the experts, despite people who actually know what actually goes on in the market, President Trump will continue to falsely claim credit because, like he says, he's like a smart person and a very stable genius. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick 1-minute break. We'll be back. Stay right here. We got more stories. We got the Democratic memo. Interesting. And then we're going to go to some policy, including what would happen if we decided to cancel all of our student debt. Push a button, student debt is gone. There's a study. I'll get to that after the break. And then, of course, we also, for the last story, have a literal Nazi running in Illinois. Stay tuned for those stories. We'll be right back. Around the Nation. Everybody, welcome back to the show. Run the Nation right here. TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're listening at. That has a like function. Like, I don't know. The only other place that we're streaming on is Mixlr. So I don't know if that has a like function or not. But anyway, if you're there, please do so. Helps the show. Also, big thanks to the patrons, patreon.com/TYTNation if you want to actually help out the show. That helps us out greatly, especially since YouTube algorithms are bearing our videos. So notice that today. We are, I guess it's hard to sort of explain, but the algorithm is now favoring, of course, establishment media sources over stuff like ours, so we're not getting in the suggested videos. So if you haven't already, please subscribe and then go back every day to check out the new clips. Make sure to share those, give some feedback, like those as well, so we can maybe make up some of the losses here that we're seeing, because we're being crushed. I'm going to be honest, we're being crushed by corporate media, so we need your guys' help. And another way you can help, of course, is to become a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. All right. That's enough about that. We got more stories. Let's go to the memo. So we all know that Donald Trump has a very short attention span. He does not like to read. He does not like to do long briefings. In fact, he's gets very bored in these briefings. His eyes sort of glaze over. It's been described as, and look, recently he just set up executive time. Now, what is executive time? That's basically time before the start of his day that lasts into about 11 a.m. And in this time, he basically sits and lays down and watches Fox and Friends while calling his friends on the phone. It's weird, but okay. Now, executive time, turns out, leaves him less time for him to actually do work. Now, then again, of course, why work when Fox and Friends tells you exactly what to do and what to think and what kind of policies? So, look, when Saturday Night Live did that thing about Fox and Friends basically running the White House, it was pretty much spot on. They'll do a segment on whatever, and half hour later, Donald Trump will tweet about it. Policy position, he gets his policy positions from Fox News. It's crazy. In fact, there was a story that I did probably a couple of weeks ago where Donald Trump explained, and this was explained by people working at Fox News, that Trump was like, quote, a crazy guy who called in all the time. And that some of the biggest compliments that you could get from Fox News is, oh, I learned something today. He's getting policy positions from Fox News. It's insane. But anyway, so now this brings me to the Nunes memo, right? This has been something that's been talked about a lot on Fox News, Hannity especially, but of course sometimes on Fox and Friends. Now, the Nunes memo has been massively hyped up, and in it that it alleges that the FBI improperly sought surveillance on a former Trump campaign advisor. Now, that advisor, of course, is Carter Page. Now, Carter Page, it's no secret that he's been a Russian agent since 2013, and he's been looked into far before the Trump campaign. So they've been looking to him for a long time. Now, that means, of course, that they had enough probable cause to get 3 different extensions of FISA surveillance warrants. Now, the memo, of course, it's not anything special. It's not a bombshell, but it got the job done. Republicans more than ever think that that the FBI is now biased against Donald Trump. And let me tell you who the FBI is really biased against. Progressives. People who want to change the system. Look at what they did to Martin Luther King Jr. That's why, of course, I have skepticism about the FBI. But knowing how conservative they are, on the other hand, makes it seem like they would be more in favor of people like Donald Trump, people who are supposedly law and order. So there must be something majorly going on, majorly wrong with Trump in the way that he's running things for the FBI to turn against a conservative. But anyway, but look, again, Donald Trump, he's an idiot. And again, the FBI is mostly conservative. I mean, look at James Comey. He's a Republican, right? Robert Mueller, he's a Republican. Peter Strzok. Now, Peter Strzok is more of anti-everybody. He didn't like Hillary, he didn't like Bernie, and he didn't like Donald Trump. So he wasn't in favor of anybody. And he also thought in his texts that the Mueller investigation would lead to nothing. So that's where he stands on the investigation that he eventually became a part of and then got later released from. Now, but apparently the Donald Trump bombshell memo. But as usual, the facts don't matter. Now, I give you this context into the memo because the Republicans wrote a memo. Devin Nunes, of course, very partisan guy, worked on the Trump transition team. Well, the Democrats also wrote their own memo. Now, this memo likely points out how the Nunes memo was basically filled with cherry-picked bullshit. Now, great. I want to see it. I'm very interested in seeing the Democratic memo, why some of the Democrats were fighting against release. I will never understand, but guess what? We get our way. It's coming out. We're going to see the memo. Okay, great. In fact, the House Intelligence Committee voted unanimously on Monday to make the Democratic memo public, sending it to the White House for review. So now this is where Trump's dumbass comes into play, and his lack of reading ability. Asked if Trump had read the Democratic memo, that he's been making so much fuss about, by the way, tweeting about how it completely vindicates him from the Mueller investigation. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly suggested that it was, quote, too lengthy for Trump to read, and that he will instead be briefed later. Let me give you the exchange here, the back and forth. They said, has the president read the Democratic memo? He has it. It's pretty lengthy, and this is Kelly responding. Yeah, but has he read the whole thing? No, I just gave it to him. He'll read it after this. Oh, of course, yeah. We'll get some people down to brief him on it. But wait a minute. Why do you need to send people down to brief him on it when he could just read it? He's got the memo. He could just pick it up and go, oh, this is the Democratic memo. Basically, John Kelly said, yeah, it's too long. It's 10 pages long. He's never going to read that. I mean, it's Donald Trump. He doesn't read. He doesn't read unless it's like a tweet. And look, he despises reading. And we've talked about this before. He gets super bored. He has no attention span, right? It's been noted before by Trump aides themselves, right? People working in the White House, that memos prepared for Trump have to be no more than a single page. They must have bullet points, but not more than 9 per page. And by the way, even though it's single page, they at least want to fill half of it with lots of graphics and maps. Killer graphics, to be clear. So basically, how much can you fit in a page? How much really important information can you fit on half a page in bullet points, where the other half takes up maps and graphics? Just imagine, man, like all that information that a president needs to know about the delicate nuances of any sort of diplomatic, for example, situation. Can't do that. Not with Trump. His eyes glaze over. He gets bored. Doug, can I do something else? I want to watch Fox and Friends. I want to watch that Steve Doocy guy. I love Doocy. This is boring. Child. Not only that, but Trump also told the Washington Post that, quote, he has little time for reading and demands that any materials provided him be short. I like bullets, or I like as little as possible. I don't need, 200-page reports on something that can be handled on a page. That can I tell you? Again, no attention span. None whatsoever. And what do you mean that you don't have time? You go to Mar-a-Lago almost every single weekend and golf. And look, Trump works a total of, now that you have executive time, you work about 6 hours a day. He actually spends more time watching Fox News and eating cheeseburgers in bed. What do you mean you don't have time to read the memo? But no, apparently he has no time whatsoever to get familiar with the Nunes memo, which again, he says completely vindicates him in the Russian probe. How do you know? How do you know if you haven't read it? Well, I've got to wait for Fox and Friends to cover it. Idiot. Moron. Man-child. Good Lord. Look, and I'm not going to quit saying that. You know why? Because it's true. And we cannot normalize this guy. This kind of behavior, this kind of whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, this is not normal. And we cannot make it normal. Because if this becomes the new normal, then we're all in big, big trouble. Okay. Moving on. Let's get to some policy here. Now, student loans currently affect over 44 million Americans across the country and actually has a very, very large negative impact on the economy, especially when it comes to millennials who have most of that student loan debt. Now, there's been a lot of ideas floated around on how to prevent amassing that debt. Now, Bernie Sanders, for example, has a free college tuition plan. Now, that would make public colleges and universities tuition-free to attend. That would be great at not actually creating more additional student loan debt. Now, under President Barack Obama, we also had 2 years of free community college. That's also a good way to prevent racking up so much debt, right? However, we've had very little discussion over what happens to the millions of people who already have that student loan debt. Again, Bernie Sanders talked about allowing borrowers to refinance at lower interest rates. The same thing with Elizabeth Warren. She, of course, has taken the government to task for basically making money off students through student loan interest, right? However, maybe the best solution to this problem isn't just prevention. Yes, that's a huge, huge part of it. However, maybe the best idea for the people who are suffering under student loan debt is just to wipe it all out together. Oh, but Jeff, that's crazy. Crazy. I mean, you guys, they borrowed the money. They knew what they were getting into. They borrowed that money. They should have to pay it back. Well, what if I told you that in canceling this debt, you would actually grow the economy as a whole? And that would actually be very significant. Now, that's what a new study from a group of economists at the Levy Economics Institute of Bard College is proposing. They find that there would actually be significant benefits if the federal government were to basically forgive all existing student loan debt. Now, Marshall Steinbaum, fellow and research director at the Roosevelt Institute and co-author of the report, said, quote, "The idea of canceling student debt is not some crazy idea out of left field, but is actually something that could be done, and done in a way that has a moderately positive economic impact." Now, of course, the first question that comes to people's mind is, yeah, but isn't that expensive? How are you going to pay for it? How are we going to pay for this? America's broke. We just can't go and forgive all this student loan debt. Why not? I mean, again, the federal government is the primary lender of student loans. They can just hit a button and make that debt disappear. That's it. And like I said before, that might equal some good things for the economy. Now, let me point out what those good things actually are. The report finds that canceling all student debt would likely lead to an increase of U.S. GDP between $861 billion and $1,083 billion over the course of 10 years. It would also lead to an increase of 1.18 to 1.55 million additional new jobs over the same period. So here you would have more economic growth and more jobs being created. That's because when you free up people from mountains of student loan debt, you actually have people that go out and they take risks and they start businesses and they create jobs. And of course, that job or those jobs lead to more economic growth. Now, they compare this, interestingly enough, in this report to the economic growth projections of the Trump tax cuts. So let's take a look at that. But first, we have a quote here. They said that what our report shows is that you can get greater macroeconomics impact, bigger bang for the buck, and that student debt cancellation has about half the budgetary effect of the Trump's tax cuts. The report finds that total loan forgiveness would cost the United States approximately $1.4 trillion in the next 10 years, a number that is almost exactly the same as what the CBO recently projected the Republican new tax bill would cost. So, in the money that we just handed the rich and 1% in tax cuts, which, by the way, 83% of that goes to the top 1%, is actually more than what it would take to wipe out everybody's federal student loan debt, grow the economy, and add 1.5 million jobs. They say that this would have a more positive impact on the economy than the tax cuts. Again, they said, this is Stephanie Kelton, Stony Brook University professor of public policy and economics, saying, quote, the GOP tax bill is going to add $1.5 trillion to deficits over the next 10 years. What else could we do? Canceling student loan debt was just about perfect when it comes in, or because it comes in at about $1.4 trillion, and it's almost 6 of one, half a dozen of the other in terms of the price tag. So she's basically saying, and she was also a co-author in the study, that if lawmakers could give $1.5 trillion in tax cuts to the rich and corporations, why can't we do something to actually help people in the economy that are struggling with student loan debt? She says that what the report shows is that you can get a greater macroeconomic impact, and I believe I said that already, bigger bang for the buck. Yeah, I said that quote already from Kelton, but think about it this way, right? The rich already have all this money. They already had money before you gave them $1.5 trillion worth of tax cuts. American corporations were sitting on $2 trillion worth of cash already. Now, they weren't using it to create new jobs. They weren't using it to boost wages. What they were using it is to buy back their own stock and inflate their stock prices. Yeah, that helps the executives. That helps the people at the top. That helps the shareholders and the CEOs. But it doesn't help the workers. Workers haven't gotten a raise, and of course that makes them rage. They haven't gotten a raise in 30 years. So it's been a long time. And so, hey, maybe we should actually do something to help the workers. And a lot of these workers right now are people that are loaded with student loan debt, that are using most of their money that they get from these wages to go and pay off that debt. Now, on the tax cuts, only 2% of Americans actually report any sort of benefit, whether it be bonuses or rising wages from that. And that shows how it's not actually going to trickle down. In fact, a lot of the companies who are getting these tax cuts are saving billions of dollars. While they're doing that, they're actually also laying people off. Carrier, Walmart, Kimberly-Clark, Harley-Davidson, they're leaving because, again, they have no demand. There is less demand because people have less money. What meager wages people are actually getting, and especially millennials, the millennial generation, most of it goes to debt servicing and rent. We have a big problem with housing prices that are too high, rents that are too high. You know, hey, man, that McMillan guy that was running in New York, the rent is too high party, that guy was absolutely right. The rent is too damn high. And not only that, like I said, all the money that goes into student loan servicing, that's money that could be freed up, that could go back into the economy. And so, look, we could actually help workers. We could actually help create demand if we actually eliminate the debt, this gigantic burden of debt off people's backs. I mean, look, let me use Kimberly-Clark as an example, right? Kimberly-Clark closing on thousands of jobs. Why? Again, no demand. Because what they sell is mostly baby products, diapers, wipes, things like that. Well, millennials aren't having kids. What's one of the reasons that millennials aren't having children, other than, of course, overpopulation and, I think, concerns about the environment? Student loan debt. They don't have the money to be able to afford to have families, right? People can't afford houses or kids because of that debt. I mean, why aren't we buying diamonds? Debt. Why aren't we eating at Applebee's or creating startup businesses? Again, it's that debt. Maybe if you remove that debt, we could actually start to participate in a big way into the economy. And that's why these projections that if you eliminate that debt, that you would have economic growth and that you would create more jobs. That would be the solution. We could actually do it. Now, unfortunately, the administration is actually not going in that direction. In fact, the administration, especially when it comes to education, Betsy DeVos is our education secretary, which is a farce. They're far more interested. She is far more interested in helping for-profit colleges who get these student loans, deregulating them, and making sure that they can take more federal money and giving you less education. So the Republicans are, of course, not interested in student loan forgiveness. And the Democrats are unfortunately too weak to propose such a radical idea as canceling all the student loan debt, which, by the way, is more than credit card debt. It's $1.4 trillion. Now, one more finding, and this adds a racial angle to it. The report found that canceling student loan debt could attenuate some long-standing racial disparities in debt and education. It noted that because of long-standing generational disparities in family wealth and income, Black and Hispanic borrowers tend to take on higher levels of debt and have a harder time paying it off than their white counterparts. Eliminating student debt, the report shows, would help keep the high cost of borrowing from exacerbating the racial wealth gap between the growing number of Americans seeking better employment through higher education. So, it's good for borrowers. It's actually good for the economy. It's good for racial justice. And it also costs less than Trump's stupid tax cuts and has more of an economic effect. So why don't we do it? Well, look, the answer is obvious. We already know the answer to that. There's no political will. What we need to do is we need to start asking our politicians why we are leaving millions of students behind under gigantic piles of debt, while we simultaneously give more and more and more to the top 1% in tax breaks. Ask them that question over and over. Hammer it into their heads if you have to. And believe me, you have to. But we have got to start changing our thinking and our framing on this issue of student loan debt, because it is hurting the economy. It is hurting people's lives. And unless we get a handle on this amount of debt that we have allowed our generation to take on, it's not going to lead to good things. It's going to lead to some very, very bad things in the future. Okay. One more story here for you guys. Now, Illinois, 3rd Congressional District, is actually a pretty safe Democratic district. Now, the incumbent, Dan Lipinski, has won the last several elections by pretty comfortable margin. It helps that he's either been running unopposed or running against terrible Republicans. So now the Republicans, at this point, have thought, hey man, we're just going to leave this whole thing alone. Except for one man, Art Jones. Now Jones is running unopposed in a Republican primary race, he will then go on to take on Dan Lipinski. Now Jones also happens to be a literal Nazi. The Chicago Sun-Times described the candidate and retired insurance agent Arthur Jones as, quote, an outspoken Holocaust denier, activist anti-Semite, and white supremacist. Yeah, that would appear to fit the criterion of a Nazi. Now, he told the newspaper that he was also a former leader, if this is not clear enough, that he was a former leader of the American Nazi Party, and that his current group, America First Committee, bars Jewish people from joining. I would say that's pretty clear. There's more. Jones' campaign website includes a section titled Holocaust? ? That features photocopy pages for typewritten flyers that describe the Holocaust racket as, quote, the biggest, blackest lie in history. Look, you go so far right, and you get into that Pandora's box, and what comes out of that box? Anti-Semitism. It always happens. You go so far to the right, that's where you end up. You know, and if you didn't notice already, that's actually what globalist stands for. And what do you think they're talking about when they talk about the globalists? They're talking about Jews. They're talking about when they go after the global financial elite. Who are they talking about? They're talking about the Jews, okay? The whole alt-right movement especially is dripping with anti-Semitism. But this guy, I don't think he really identifies as alt-right. He just says, no, I'm just a Nazi. Well, hey, at least he's honest about it. Now, he also suggests that a few professional concentration camp survivors continue to promote this conspiracy. Notice, professional concentration camp survivors. It's not real. Never happened. It's actually a lie. Now, where have we heard that kind of thing before? Oh, right. It's what many in the right, including Alex Jones, InfoWars, for example, say about every kind of school shooting, right? Oh, they're just paid actors. It's not real. It didn't actually happen. No, it's a false flag. It's a false flag operation to make you what? Well, I guess in the case of gun control, he makes the argument that, well, they want to take your guns. Okay, what's the argument for denying the Holocaust? Something that we have documented proof, that we have video of, that we've seen, newsreels. And you could go to the places where they gassed people. Auschwitz. And again, there's pictures of horrible pictures, horrific things of Jewish people getting rounded up and putting into these gas chambers. I mean, there were stories, and it's really difficult to think about, where they would have gas and these people would take 10, 15, 20 minutes to die in just absolute agony. It's horrific. And to sit there and deny that, of course, that makes you an absolutely disgusting person. But anyway, again, if you also deny Sandy Hook, you're also a pretty fucking terrible person. But anyway, now, when asked by the Sun-Times about his views, because again, they were very curious, like, hey, you're a Holocaust denier, you're a white supremacist, you're pretty much a Nazi. Like, what gives? What gives? Here's his answer. He explained that he's, quote, running for Congress, not for Chancellor of Germany. What does it even mean? And by the way, let's hope he's not. Last time that happened, it turned out to be very, very bad for the world. Now, of course, Germany is a lot different than it was before. Germany is actually a very strong democracy. And they actually go and they look at their history, and they're very shameful of that history. And they're very open to admitting that, yes, this happened. And guess what? We don't want this to happen ever again. And, you know, this is a black stain on our history. And so, hey, man, look, they actually confront their past. Here in America, when it comes to, for example, the horrors of slavery and the Confederacy, we have people out there that are erasing that past. And so, and say, what are you talking about? It never happened. No, the slaves were actually treated very, very well. They were fed very well. They're well fed when they were enslaved and building the White House. Ugh. Disgusting. But anyway, so this guy, Art, is running as, again, a Republican, right? But this isn't the first time he's ran. He's actually ran several times In fact, this is the 8th time, according to Raw Story, that the 70-year-old candidate has run for a Republican primary in Illinois, 3rd District, all of which he obviously lost. Well, good. Wait, you might be asking, can the Republicans run somebody else? I mean, why are they running a Nazi? Well, I'm going to get to their answer in a minute. But look, Lipinski is an incumbent. He's in a very strong Democratic district, a very safe district. So the chances of a normal Republican beating him are actually very, very low. So I think most Republicans decide, I'm not going to run. But at least, I don't know, maybe save some face by running somebody to beat the Nazi. And look, they did that in 2012. In fact, there was a 3-way race where you had Richard Grabowski, who was the eventual winner. He got 39% of the vote when running against Dan Lipinski. That's decent. Wasn't a complete blowout. But he got, in this primary, 59% of the votes. That's about 20,000 votes. You had Jim Falvey, was another Republican, getting 29% of the vote. That's 10,000 votes. And then Jones. Jones received 11% of the Republican vote. That is 3,861 votes. So over almost 4,000 people in Illinois, the 3rd District, these are Republicans, said, you know what? I'm going to vote for that guy. I like the Nazi. I'll pick him. Dude, you know that number should be 0. But to be fair, the Republican Party itself has come out very, very strongly against Jones. I actually really like their quote here. And they mince no words, by the way. This is Tim Schneider, spokesman for the Illinois Republican Party, at least for the 3rd District. He said, our chapter and our country have no places for Nazis like Arthur Jones. We strongly oppose his racist views and his candidacy for any public office, including the 3rd Congressional District. That is a very strong position. Again, give him credit on that. Although maybe I shouldn't, because going against a Nazi and denouncing Nazis is pretty much the easiest thing that you can do. Hey, maybe we should tell our president that, who seems somewhat reluctant, or who seems somewhat reluctant to be able to do that. Again, remember Charlottesville, when you had actual neo-Nazis and KKK members and white supremacists that were marching in Charlottesville. And what did the president say? Well, some on both sides were very fine people. No, there are no fine Nazis. Again, Tim Schneider said it best. There is no place for Nazis in America. And unfortunately, Trump, however, and some on the hard right seem to beg to differ. Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Again, a big thank you to Ron Placone for being here earlier on today's show. That's an excellent discussion. If you missed it already, don't worry. It'll be up later on our YouTube page. So check that out. Again, fun discussion. All right. Everybody, if you haven't already, please give us a like. Also, go through, share and like our videos. That helps out a lot. Sharing is caring, of course. It's especially important now since we are kind of being buried by the YouTube algorithm. So it really, really helps us out. Also, another way to help us out, Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation. That's a big, big help for our channel. Especially, again, since ad revenue is definitely not what it used to be. So, anyway, thank you so much. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Oh, wait, hold on. I have a request. By the way, very stable genius. I get a lot of people asking me about my shirt, so that is very stable genius. Okay. Now we're out of here. We'll see y'all tomorrow.